sparkling, golden, pure, refreshing.
Beer is America's beverage. Pretty much everything in America that's important is around beer.
Vietnam? That's that sudsy amber stuff, right? Yeah, I've been hearing good things about it.
This should be an interesting show. We have a guest who is allergic to beer and a host who never touches the stuff. So naturally, the subject is beer. Anat Baron is the director of a new documentary called Beer Wars. It's now available for sale on DVD, but it's not a movie about rival frat houses. On second thought, maybe it is. Baron presents a sometimes tongue-in-cheek study about how the big three brewing companies, Anheuser-Busch, Coors and Miller, and of course that's now Coors Miller, will stop at nothing to gobble up shelf space in your neighborhood convenience, grocery, or liquor store and kick the little guys to the curb. Sprinkled throughout the film are familiar pop culture touchstones from old beer commercials, industrial films, and even a word about competition from an imaginary beer, Duff. And Baron, as I mentioned, is allergic to beer, but that didn't stop her from becoming general manager of Mike's Hard Lemonade, where she took the company from nowhere to $200 million in sales. Annette, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you here. And since neither of us is hoisting a beer, I'd like to start by asking what you do drink, because I'm putting back a cherry Dr. Pepper.
Oh, I'm drinking an Honest Tea green tea, actually. You know, it is morning out here, so. But even if it wasn't, actually, I can't drink, so it's not like there are no afternoon cocktails over at my office.
Now, I'm curious about that. How does one find out that they're allergic to beer?
I'm actually allergic to alcohol. I happen to have many allergies, like shellfish and peanuts and things like that. And so alcohol is just one of the more extreme ones. It's pretty rare, but it's actually a compound that's found in alcohol. So it's a non-exclusive allergy, and somehow I found out about it when I could outdrink everyone when I was at graduate school, and one day it just kind of stopped and my throat closed up. So that was kind of the end of my drinking career at 22, and since then I've had to appreciate life completely sober. Wow.
I don't know how you feel about this, but I'd kind of like to gift several family members and friends with that allergy, but, you know.
Right. But what it did in making this film was take the focus away from, wow, this beer tastes great, or spitting the beer out, and it took the focus onto the business of beer, which was really my interest in making the film. I mean, while it's set in the beer industry, the beer industry really is a backdrop for my take on what's happening with the American economy, with capitalism, and I mean, it really covers some very big issues. They just happen to take place in the beer industry because a lot of the David and Goliath fights are happening in that industry right now.
And was it during your time at Mike's that kind of the roots of Beer Wars began?
Absolutely not. I never actually thought about making a documentary until after I left. I had actually started making another film, and in the mail one day appeared the invitation to the annual beer industry convention, which is in the film. And it was just one of those things where I was on the phone with a friend, and I just blurted out loud, I wonder if I can make a movie about this, and if anybody ever had. And it's just really one of those things that developed out of nowhere. I wish that there was some great story about how my entire life I wanted to do this, but that would be a lie.
So you didn't have this lifetime Jones to make documentaries?
No, I had actually. I have quite the storied career. This is my sixth attempt at a career, and I've done many different things. I had made movies for television, which are narrative films, which are script based, before I was at Mike's, and so I did know about structure and about movie making, but you know, I always had like a $4 million, $5 million budget to make my films, and this was very different. This was, you know, bare bones, and I think the biggest challenge of making a documentary compared to making any other type of film is that there's no script. So you start a project, and unless you're making something, you know, a film about something that happened in the past, but if you're following characters as I do, you just don't know where they're going to end up. I had no idea where Sam, who's one of the lead characters in the film, or Rhonda, where their stories or their journeys would take them. And so you're really taking this leap of faith where you sit down in the editing room with all this footage. I had 200 hours of footage and go, oh, my God, how do I tell this story in an interesting way?
And that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And actually, I'm going to ask you this because my daughter's going to be working on a documentary. So you just went out and gathered all the footage and then decided how the film would flow and that kind of thing?
No, I mean, obviously when you start out, I mean, you have to have some sort of general idea or else you would shoot, as some people do, 1,000 hours of footage, and that's why people spend 8 years gathering footage and then they have to figure it out. I always knew, again, because of my experience in the beer industry, that I wanted to set up this David and Goliath. I knew what it was like to be a small player fighting the big boys, if it were. And things were changing when I started making the film. It was 4 years ago, actually, in September, that I started shooting. And so I had a general idea. I knew two things. I knew that things were changing in the beer industry, and I also knew that I wanted to find two characters who I would follow. I didn't want to make a talking head film, which a lot of documentaries are, where you just go talk to a bunch of experts and you throw the interviews together and there's your movie. And sometimes those work really well. It just wasn't a story I wanted to tell. I really wanted the audience to connect with the characters in the film. Personally, for me, the best films are the ones where I find some sort of emotional connection with someone in the movie and I relate to that. And so what I did was try to find those, quote, characters, if you will, almost like a casting session. And so I had met Rhonda when I was doing a set of interviews at that convention I was talking about, and everybody was totally intrigued with her story because here was someone who was called the Queen of Beer. She was the co-founder of the most successful craft beer company in America, Sam Adams. And here she went from like the epitome and the top to starting over and starting her own business by herself. And we really watch her struggle, and boy, does she struggle to make it. So her journey is very much an entrepreneurial journey. And then I also knew that I wanted to follow a craft brewer. This whole generation now of these young, brash brewers who are making these what are called extreme beers and doing crazy things with beer. And, I did a whole bunch of interviews, met a whole bunch of people, and the minute I saw this guy, Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head, I just knew he was the guy, and people laughed because when people see the film, he's obviously attractive and lovely and very articulate. But beyond that, he was the one guy who wasn't afraid to speak the truth in front of the camera. I think that the one thing people don't talk about, which is really the challenge of making a documentary film beyond kind of finding the story, which is in this day and age of YouTube and everything else, people are afraid to talk when you put a camera in their face. They just are, because they know that it's going to stick around forever. And Sam wasn't mincing his words. He spoke the truth. And I really wanted to find, my two main characters who would allow me complete access and who wouldn't be thinking about what they're saying before they said it.
How did their situations change from the time that you met them until the time, two points, to the time that you had to stop and actually put the film together and now?
Well, Sam was a rising star. I mean, Dogfish Head at the time was starting to do well. But he has really become kind of the rock star. He hates that term, so hopefully we won't get back to him. But, he really has become the rock star and almost the symbol of this craft brewing movement that's going on in America today. And he's really become a superstar. I mean, he had a full-featured story about him in The New Yorker this past November. So he's really, as a personality, and his brewery have just gone through the stratosphere. I mean, they're growing like crazy. They've really found a niche for themselves. They have very, very rabid fans who just, will drink anything they make, and he sells out of some of the limited edition beers that he makes. And on the other hand, Rhonda, her story was different. She was a startup, and she wasn't making a craft beer. She came up with this idea of making a beer with caffeine. And whether you think it's a great idea or not, I think ultimately I picked her because of that. I thought, wow, what an intriguing concept. I have no idea if it tastes good. I have no idea if it's a good idea, but I wonder if there's a market for it. And she did not succeed as well as Sam, and she's really struggled. I mean, her story is so emblematic of entrepreneurs in America today where you just need money to get going. And when you're fighting the big guys, and I show in the film how, she's barely in 12 stores, and Anheuser-Busch comes in and copies her and tries to get her out of business. So not only are you trying to raise money to keep your company going and to get people to try your product and to get people to see it, but at the same time, you're fighting against the largest company who's trying to get you out before you even get a chance to start. So her story is not a failure because people assume for some reason that she's failed. She hasn't. She's still out there trying to make it happen, but I can't say that she has found wide success yet. She's very tenacious.
Well, during the course of the show, I have a couple of clips from the movie that I want to play. This one, I think, fits in with what we're talking about here, the space on shelves. And, folks, if you're interested in calling and you've got a comment or question for Anat Baron, director of the new documentary film Beer Wars, you can give us a call, 1-646-595-3135. We've got a call on hold. If you're calling to ask a question, stay on there, and I'll come to you in just a minute. But, folks, give a listen to this from Beer Wars.
General Mills may come out with 50 different cereals. Part of the reason why they have 50 different cereals is not just because they think they're all selling well, but because those 50 cereals will take up more space on the shelves and at the expense of one of their rivals.
It is a jungle in the supermarket. If you think about the environment of a supermarket where there's finite shelf space, that is the battle for a beer company like ourselves to bring in new products. Where do you get the space? Well, generally, you try to get it from a competitor.
No deal, Al. I can't move anybody out to move you in.
If I work it out, that okay?
Well, I don't know.
Attaboy.
Real beer taste. Say hello, Mellow Jack.
Hey, BB, bring that Busch Bavarian into this big empty space. Sometimes you have to use a different approach.
In 2005, Anheuser-Busch introduced Budweiser Select.
So what's different about Budweiser Select? Good question.
And here we have Duff, Duff Light, and our newest flavor, Duff Dry. What does the future hold for Duff? Let's just say we've got a few ideas up our sleeve.
That, of course, is from The Simpsons. Let's go to the phones. Hi, do you have a comment or question for Anat Baron?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, this is Vince calling from California.
Hi, welcome, Vince.
Hi, Annette. I'm glad that you did this, and I wish I had known that you were doing this because I could have given you some insight because I worked for a brewery in Canada for 9 years, and I'm glad that you are doing this. And one thing I found was they have when I worked at the brewery, they had like the same beer, but they were marketing under different names. Like, for instance, they had Old Vienna, which was the exact same make of another beer, but just a different name on it, and it was from the same company too. And I could never understand it. And then it was just the only thing I could figure out was it's all about marketing.
Right. Well, ultimately, the beer industry really is all about marketing.
Right.
I have a taste test in the film. One of the things, because I can't drink beer, is that I don't know if they taste different or not, but I was always fascinated by the fact that when you go into a bar, people love their brands. I'm a Bud guy, I'm a Miller guy, I'm a Coors guy, and so I decided to do, mind you, an unscientific test, but, I tried to keep it very, very straightforward and got people to actually try the different beers when they claimed that they knew which was which, and found that most of the time, people didn't know one from the other. And when you kind of drill down into it, you realize that they're a Bud guy because they like the advertising or because they support the sports team, but it's rarely about them really falling in love with the taste of the beer. And so it really is about the label and the image in the beer industry.
Yeah, and you're so right. And my other question is, since you've become a producer and everything, I was just wondering if by any chance you could use an actor who's SAG, who's looking for acting parts right now.
I'm actually not making another film, and I probably will make another documentary before I make another narrative film. But thank you for asking. I know it's really tough out there, but that's not kind of my purview at the moment.
Right. And I also just recently worked for a soft drink company here in California, too. Boy, do I have a lot to say about that. And the way they operate is just unbelievably horrendous. So.
All right. Well, Vince, we can save the soft drink stories for another day, but thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. And Annette, we didn't rehearse this, but I actually have the clip from the beer taste test. So let's go to that for a minute. People hear what you're talking about.
Together, the big three brewers make up 78% of the U.S. beer market. Making beer that seems to look a lot alike. Can beer drinkers tell them apart?
Beer. I need beer.
In front of you right here, in this very non-scientific study, we have A, B, and C. If you could take a sip of A, B, and C, and then tell me which one is the Coors Light.
I think it's A.
You think it's A?
I picked A.
And A
is Bud Light.
Bud Light. Are you surprised?
Yes.
What is it that makes you a Coors Light guy?
Habit.
Habit, advertising. You obviously you make the point, obviously, that many beer drinkers can't tell the difference between a Busch, a Miller, or a Coors product. But what, other than getting a good buzz going after work, do they really care about when it comes to who makes their beer? Is it price? Is it the whatever's cold in front of them?
Well, I think that a lot of people make the mistake of just lumping all beer drinkers. You know, I think for a long time in America, what we thought that when you said the word beer, we really thought of Animal House, you know, a bunch of frat guys, you know, drinking and partying and throwing up and all of that. And I think that the perception of beer is starting to change a little bit. So it really depends, like anything else. You know, people who consume beer do it for different reasons. Some people do it to get drunk. And they're not really paying attention so much to what the beer tastes like. If you're just trying to get drunk, you buy the highest alcohol beer and you just keep drinking it. It doesn't matter about quality. And then other people drink it to relax. Other people drink it. I think it's a very social beverage. I think at the end of the day, all the hoopla about the beer summit with the president, what do they call it? The president, the professor, and the policeman. You know, that summit, the reason he chose beer is because really that is the beverage that guys drink, you know, when they go out after work. So it's very social. It's easy to drink. You can share it. Like, you know, you can order a pitcher of it. And then there's this kind of new consumer, if you will, that really cares about, that's more, I hate to use the word connoisseur, they call themselves beer geeks. And those people are really interested in the flavor and the composition of the beer, almost like wine people are. You know, beer is becoming the new wine, if you will. And they're not drinking it to get drunk. They're drinking it to match like certain foods with certain beers. They're drinking it to appreciate it. So I think that just like in any product, if you will, I mean, cereal is cereal to an extent. You're eating it to get full at breakfast, you know. But with beer, there's so many different reasons. And, you know, even the guys who drink these new kind of beers, these hoppier beers, people will admit that they will drink a Bud Light, which people call a lawnmower beer, because it's the kind of beer that you drink on a really hot summer day. You want something cold and easy to drink. So I think there are different beers for different occasions, and people drink them for different reasons. But I was really interested by these new consumers who aren't, by the way, just drinking craft beers. You know, these are similar consumers to the ones who are going to farmers markets and who are eating more local foods and who are supporting smaller companies instead of big companies and who are eating local cheeses and local chocolate, et cetera. You know, people who are saying, well, you know what, yeah, I can buy chocolate from Hershey, but there's a guy down the street who's making it, and he makes it himself, and I really want to support him. And these are some of the same customers that are drinking these beers.
I want to ask you, you know, you focus in the movie on these two small brewers, the Dogfish Head and
Moonshot.
It's a new Moonshot, right? Yeah. But I'm all for a good story of little guys taking a swing at behemoths. But doesn't any artisanal or mom-and-pop brewer really basically enter the business knowing at this point that the odds are stacked against them for everything?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think in America today, no matter what business you go into, as the little guy, there's always a large corporate entity that dominates, and usually it's two or three corporate entities dominate almost every industry. In some industries, you don't actually have little guys, like in the car business, right, where the barrier to entry, I mean, it costs too much to manufacture a car, so you only have a few companies. But in other industries, you absolutely always have, like, the big behemoths who control it. Pick an industry, any industry. We can come up with many, many different examples. And the little guys. It's just that in beer, because of the laws, because of the three-tier system, it's just tougher. You can't, for example, in any other industry, if you and I decided to make, I don't know, iced tea since I'm drinking it, you know, we could get it directly to consumers. We could go to a store and sell it to them directly. We don't need a distributor. We could get it out in our local neighborhood, and we could sell it on the Internet if people were willing to pay for the shipping. With beer, you can't do that. So it just makes it tougher once, you know, to get in, and then once you're in, to compete with these guys, because it's also a very cutthroat industry. So yes, you know that, but then everybody believes. I mean, that's, you know, if people didn't believe as entrepreneurs that they will succeed, we would not have entrepreneurship. I mean, everyone tells you, yeah, it's tough and money's tough and you might fail, but you kind of have to, you know, watch motivational tapes, I guess, to forget all of that so that you keep going, because otherwise nobody would ever start anything.
Well, and folks, one of the things you need to know about the film is that as if it's not tough enough already for these smaller, these microbrews and the artisan and the craft brews, call them what you will, the smaller brews, there's this whole other issue that Anat focuses on in the film, and that's when a company called the Green Valley Brewing Company starts marketing an organic beer. And I have another clip here I want to play with this, and we'll talk about this in just a moment.
Here's a company that seems to be getting in on the organic boom. Green Valley Brewing, Fairfield, California.
Can I ask you a question? Do you know where the Green Valley Brewing Company is?
I've never heard of it.
I know where Green Valley is, but not the Green Valley Brewing Company.
Is there another brewery in this town?
Oh, yeah.
What brewery is there?
Budweiser. Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch.
Anheuser-Busch.
Budweiser. That's the only brewery I know of, and that's not like a microbrewery, which sounds like what you're speaking of. So.
Wild Hop, it's an organic beer. Have you heard of it?
No.
It's like an organic beer, and it says on it Green Valley Brewing?
No, I'm a Bud man. That sounds like a microbrewery to me, because it's not something large and conglomerate like Anheuser-Busch.
That is the Anheuser-Busch brewery right out here. Absolutely.
I believe they're out that way.
And you can get on Highway 12. You can get to both Jelly Valley and Budweiser.
Maybe it's behind that thing. This is the Green Valley Brewing Company? No wonder Anheuser-Busch doesn't put its name on the label.
So, Annette, you make it sound like a crime that Anheuser-Busch would not put its name on its own product and call itself something else. Is there something wrong with that?
Well, listen, legally, they're not doing anything wrong. I think the question becomes, you know, and this is, I guess, a moral question and a question really about capitalism and how much the consumer cares. But if I go to the store and I see this new organic beer and it's made by this company and it looks very bucolic, as a consumer, I'm led to believe that it's made by a small company. And now why does that matter? Well, it's probably sitting right next to a company that's made, to a beer that's made by by a real small organic beer company. And because Anheuser-Busch has economies of scale on its side and they can make things cheaper, it's probably cheaper. So for the consumer who's looking for that product, if that consumer is really looking to support small companies, then they're really not. And, you know, it's kind of buyer beware. And the other, I think, issue is that by Anheuser-Busch using their marketing muscle, if you will, and their muscle over shelf space, they're able to get their organic beer on the shelf before someone else does. So that what happens, it basically becomes a shelf grab, if you will, where they're trying to deliver to that store all of the different types of beers, gluten-free beer and organic beer and pumpkin beer, et cetera, so that while it looks to the consumer like there's a lot of variety on the shelf, so many of the products are actually coming from the same place and are not being made by the small bucolic company out there somewhere in Vermont, but they're actually being made in the Budweiser plant. And that's really a personal decision. You know, who you buy from is a very personal decision, and I think everyone should make it for themselves.
I was going to say, I'm looking for a beer that doesn't taste like beer. That's the one I'm interested in tasting. That's just
well, and a lot of these craft beers, apparently, the reason they're doing well is they don't taste. When you say that they don't taste like beer, they don't taste like the Bud, Miller, Coors that you probably don't like. And you know, these craft brewers are bringing a lot of women into these beers because they don't taste like beer. You know, they taste like something more interesting and more complex, sometimes fruity. You know, it really depends. You know, it's a very personal taste. You know, some people like a really hoppy beer. Some people don't like things that are bitter, so they want a more fruity beer. And, you know, what am I talking about? I don't even know what it tastes like. But it does make sense that, you know, that these guys in their experimentation have expanded on the concept of what beer can be.
Now, and we're going to wrap up in just a minute or two, but when you were running Mike's Hard Lemonade, which is about, you started there, I think, around 2000, 2001?
2001, uh-huh.
Yeah. Did you, at that company, did you face the wrath of the major beer companies, or was that a separate, were they trying to get the space that Mike's was going after as well, or were you in a different category as far as they were concerned?
I mean, Mike's is sold together with beer. It's called a malternative, which stands for malt alternative.
Right.
But it is malt-based, and it was a brand new category when Anthony von Mandel, who created the company, he started a brand new category. And this is the one thing that, if people kind of leave the movie remembering one thing, it's this, that when you go to the store and you see the beer cooler, the giant beer cooler, whether it's 28 feet or 40 feet, it's a fixed space, right? So that if you are Mike's Hard Lemonade or Dogfish Head or any small brewer, and you want to put a new beer on that shelf, something has to come off. Got it? So once that happens, it means that anybody new is in competition with what is already there. Boy, that's a tongue twister. And so basically that means that for the people who are already established on that shelf, you're always wanting to hang on to your real estate, if you will. It's kind of like a real estate game, right? And so when Mike started, we always look at it and go, new product comes there. If you're selling a Mike's Hard Lemonade, you're probably selling a little less Bud or a little less something else. And so, of course, the big guys are going to try to protect their turf. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what capitalism is, and that's why there's so many unanswered questions in the film, because they're so much bigger than the movie. These are questions that America is wrestling with every day about what is free enterprise and how much government interference should there be, and should we just let the markets dictate for themselves? But that's what's happening in beer. Nobody's doing anything about it. The big guys control the shelf space. Yes, the little guys are slowly making inroads, but it's still really controlled by two companies. And they, and when you have like one or two players who are controlling the real estate, it's tough. So the answer to your question is, yes, at Mike's Hard Lemonade, what happened was the company was launched, and Anheuser-Busch came out with competing products, trying to kill the category. And then when that didn't work, Miller and Coors, but Miller in particular, came out with some brands to try to fight it. The Miller brands all went away. Coors only ever had Zima, which some people may have heard of and has since gone away. And then Anheuser-Busch came out with something called Bacardi Silver, which is a joint venture between themselves and Bacardi, and that's how they were able to grab shelf space. And so, there is no competitor that's too small for these guys, because they never know where the next big guy is going to come from. I don't think that anybody ever thought when Mike started that it would get as big as it is. Or Sam Adams, for that fact.
All right. And I guess last question, because we're going to run out of time here. During the making of the film, and since the film has come out, have you had any contact from the big two? Have they, of course it started as big three, but big two, have they reached out to you either positively or negatively, or have they just kind of pretended you weren't there?
They have pretty much pretended that I don't exist. I think they would like the movie to go away. And they're probably thrilled that the independent film world is the way it is today, so that it didn't get the wide distribution that a Super Size Me would have gotten, you know. And so I think that potentially if things were different and, you know, I had a huge distributor, et cetera, things would have been much different, and potentially they would have come after me. Although, you know, obviously I made sure that I had the right lawyers and that everything was checked out. And frankly, I made a movie that told the truth. And so I'm not sure what they would come after me for, to be honest with you.
Well, you know, even for a non-beer drinker like myself, it's a fascinating movie. It's very well done. It's got a lot of it moves quickly. It's got a story with the two craft brewers, and it's very interesting. And folks, I want you to know if you can learn more about Anat Baron's documentary film Beer Wars by going to the website www.beerwarsmovie.com. That's beerwarsmovie.com, all solid, and you can find a trailer there. You can also order a copy of Beer Wars there, or you can do it by clicking on the ad on MrMedia.com. Anat, very interesting, and thank you so much for being on Mr. Media today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Good luck with the film.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And folks, for more interviews with your favorite independent film directors and writers, you can surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with the men and women behind Obsessed, Dog Days of Summer, Captain Abu Raid, The Singing Revolution, Steam, Little Chicago, Election Day, In the Shadow of the Moon, and many more. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for Mr. Media, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites. Whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, TrueSlant, Digital Journal, Vox, Podcast Pickle, MediaFly, Blueberry, Zencast, Symbio, or Odeo. Subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. Or subscribe to Mr. Media's blog on the Amazon Kindle Reader. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, email me directly at bob@andelman.com. That's ANDELMAN. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, www.twitter.com/Andelman. Thanks so much for joining us today. Always appreciate when you give up a piece of your day to spend it with us. And let's go out with one more clip from Beer Wars.
Beer and ale hold their place on the shopping list today, along with the bread and milk and vegetables.
With their huge marketing budgets, the big brewers killed off many local and regional breweries.
The brewers are spending more and more on marketing and advertising, doing what tobacco companies have done for generations. We see horses, big ones, for beer, bars, nice ones, beer basketball, beer softball, beer volleyball, even beer soccer.
The result was devastating to the small brewers.
The Great American Beer War, a battleground of corporations, careers, and cash since 1970.